the value that research and clinical medicine have with each other, and how that relates to the patient care. I think all of you are in medicine because you want to make a difference, and we need you to continue the mission that a lot of us have already set forth in previous generations. And I think you need to, you are what medicine is going to be in like 10 to 15 years from now. It's not going to be what medicine was back in 1980 or 1950. And so the patient population is going to be needs to be reflected by the physician population. So that's why diversity is a key element in the recruiting process, because we need physicians who are going to be like the population that they're going to be treating 10 to 15 years from now. Behind each school, the student body is the core. I mean, the building I'm in right now is just 4 walls and a roof, but the people inside it make it thrive. And I think a lot of times we view you as a renewable resource on an annual basis, and you always remind us as to why all of us went into medicine in the first place. Let's see. There's always a unique story behind each patient, and I think a lot of what you're going to need to do is learn that and become invested in it, because what you do with a patient, it's a two-way street. It's a partnership, it's a bond, and you have to show that you're invested. And that's why you need to have a diverse portfolio of experiences, because you're going to need to dig into that portfolio in order to find something that you have in common with the people that you're going to be taking care of. And then it could be something as simple as cooking, where you lived, what your parents did, or something like that. But you've got to find some sort of common ground in order to establish a relationship with the people you're going to be taking care of. And then key elements that you're going to, I think all of you probably need to have, and this probably may apply to all the other schools as well: critical thinking, creative thinking, leadership, research or advanced thought process, or at least understanding of a hypothesis-driven thought process. All these things promote, advance, and improve medical practice, and thereby improve patient outcomes, improve community outcomes. And I think our curriculum is also a little bit different in that we introduced the clinical element a lot earlier. I know that we had been, people had always kind of like were perplexed by this for a number of decades when Duke started this decades ago, but I think the national trend seems to be shifting towards going towards earlier clinical integration. And just from a personal standpoint, part of the more frustrating things that I had when I was in med school was learning the basic sciences, just sitting in the classroom, and stuff that I already learned as an undergrad, and it became very irritating at times to just sit there and go, why am I learning about biochem when I already did this before? But I think there's much more appreciation for the basic science once you actually see it in the clinical realm. And I think it helps you to retain that material a lot better and integrate it a lot better. And I think it holds more value for in the future. All right, and then anything else? Do you want us to share words of advice or save that for later?
We'll come back to that.
Okay, got it, okay.
All right, Linda, again, a little bit about your school, mission goals, and some unique aspects of your school.
Hi, I'm Linda Brody-Demo. I'm the Dean of Admission and Enrollment at the Drexel University College of Medicine in Philadelphia. So our school is one of the larger schools in the country. We have 300 students, and we'll have 300 students in our first year class. Last year it was 260. We just added a brand new campus in Reading, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour and 15 minutes from Philadelphia. Brand new building, brand new campus. We'll have 40 students there and 260 in Philadelphia. The building is where we cut the tags off in July. And we already have 3rd and 4th year students at the Tower Health System, which is one of the larger health systems in Pennsylvania, but it'll now house 1st, 2nd, and 3rd and 4th year students. We also are a school that has a distributed model. So students in our 3rd and 4th year, some of them stay in Philadelphia, but some of them go through other parts of Pennsylvania. We even have a site here in California in the Bay Area where we have some of our students who do their 3rd and 4th year. Our school has traditionally and always been a community-centered and a community-based school. And that means that we work really closely with all of the communities that our students serve and the patients that our health system serves. We have an early introduction to our communities in our course called our Health Advocacy Practicum, where students in their 1st year work with patients and families and organizations, and they follow those same patients and families and organizations for the first 2 years. Coronavirus has made that a little bit of a challenge this year. But in other years, our students will probably would spend time with these patients and families, and then oftentimes in their 3rd and 4th year still get involved. We run 4 to 5 free health clinics around the city of Philadelphia, and we will have a free health clinic also in our site in Reading. And so our school is really community-based. So we're looking for students who are really interested in being deeply and proximally engaged in their community.
Thank you. And Ageisha.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ageisha Lanier. I am from Kaiser Permanente Bernard J. Tyson School of Medicine. We are the new kid on the block as far as medical schools go. School opened in July of last year. So our first cohort just finished their 1st semester. Are committed to admitting about 48 to 50 students for now for the first 5 cohorts that we bring in. There is a possibility we are going to increase that after the first 5 years. We are located in Pasadena, California, and a couple of things that makes this a little unique. We basically say we do not have lectures. We are more focused on small group, case-based team learning. So if you're into PBL, problem-based learning, that's our jam. We actually have well-being is in the curriculum. That is something that we have made a part of our curriculum as what we call REACH, where our students are working with coaches that are Kaiser Permanente doctors, but they are also faculty members. So you will have mentors and coaches throughout your whole program. The students also do what we call a longitudinal integrated clerkship, LICs. Basically, the first 2 years, our students are actually working within 6 of our hospitals that we've chosen to show different diversity of members, or what we call members or patients. And actually our students started going into clinical spaces within the first 3 weeks of school. So they are getting that experience. We do have 3 joint degree programs. Students haven't started them yet. They're designed to start that in their 3rd year of medical school. But that is our joint programs is with UCLA, USC, and Loyola Marymount. And we also have an MD PhD program with Caltech. And then 2 big things, we do not have a cadaver lab. We actually have anatomy resource lab, which is with cadavers that are plastinated, and they are basically human specimens that have already been dissected, but in plastic form, and also use virtual reality simulation a lot too. And then just last but not least, I can't really get away from it, but we have committed to offering free tuition for the first 5 cohorts that come in for all 4 years. And then I guess, am I missing anything else?
No, you did great.
All right.
So jumping back to you, Charlene, can you please speak to the admission process at your school from secondaries to offers?
Sure. I'm actually going to start a little pre-secondary. So I think, as many might know, with the global pandemic, it's made things really challenging for the medical education community nationwide. I'm sure the other panel members can attest to really trying to be thoughtful about what holistic admissions looks like in this environment, how we can guide our many admissions committee members to systemically look at applicants in a holistic fashion while still keeping in mind the barriers that applicants have in this current cycle. And now we're going into a new cycle where we're not just talking about spring 2020, right? So for this past cycle, spring 2020 was like the problem for applicants, where activities started to not be available, pass-fail grades, online coursework, and now we're really moving into an environment where this is going to be the case for probably the next couple of cycles. So those challenges aside, for our process, I'll just talk about from a numbers perspective, kind of how our process works. So on an average year, we would typically get about 7,000 applications. This year, we almost got about 10,000. So we had 9,712 applications for this current cycle that we're in for the class that will start in the fall of 2021. We usually offer about half of those applicants a secondary application invite. And most of y'all know, but secondaries are like a supplemental application. Every single school's secondary is incredibly different. I've helped many pre-med students within our post-bac programs and pre-meds and other programs that we have, with different, secondary prompts, and every school is like completely different. Hopefully you're working with health professions advising, other departments and mentors. And the best advice I can give you is to be really organized always, but particularly in this cycle where interviews are pretty much all virtual and things like that. It's really hard to confuse which portal is which password and where you're supposed to be, because it's not like most schools are sending like a calendar invite to you when you're interviewing, when your interview is. So that's some really good advice. I would just be organized, keep track of all the secondaries you write on a Google Doc so you can kind of tweak them towards that school. So we offer, as I mentioned, about half of our total applicant pool will receive a secondary invite. From there in our process, we have kind of like a systematic algorithm actually that our applicants are looked at with their undergrad GPA first, their MCAT, and then also we have at UC Davis what's called distance travel. So that's our effort to really take holistic to the next level as far as placing a metric value on someone's background, their narrative, the attributes that they bring from coming from a disadvantaged background or things that they've had to overcome. And it's based on questions that you answer in your MCAT application. So that metric, along with 3 screeners, actually review your application for you to be offered an interview. So by the time you are offered an interview already, around probably 4 committee members have looked at your application. And again, if we're trying to get 10,000 applications, all the way to 136 will be our matriculating first year class number for this year. That's roughly like less than 2% of like the entire pool. So it is a competitive process, but I think that's why we have so many people involved. So after you are screened and offered an interview, then you actually go through 3 different committee reviews of your whole application, basically. So by the time you get to matriculation in our process, literally 25 people have touched your application for this holistic review process. So that's pretty much the kind of start to finish for our process.
Thank you. Linton?
Yes, so yeah, we experienced a significant increase in applications as well. So in 2020, just through AMCAS, we received 7,622, and then of that, 4,365 were completed. For 2021, we received 9,071 from AMCAS, and of that, 5,484 completed the secondary. So our process in terms of sending out secondaries is a little bit different than most schools. I think people know that Duke's essays are probably the most challenging within the United States. And there's a reason for that, and I'll go into that in a little bit. But everybody gets sent a secondary application. So people self-screen. So if you're willing to live up to the challenge of filling out the essays, we're willing to review your application. If you don't feel that you want to go through the essays, then maybe this isn't the right school for you. But part of the goal with the essays is that you need to understand why you're doing this. And you also need to convince admissions committees as to the fact that why you're going into this. I mean, this is a marathon type thing. This isn't a sprint. So this is a long-term commitment that you're involved with. And so you need to have a very good understanding as to, why you're going to be challenging yourself and pushing yourself for years on end. And so, that's why, we have the essay questions. I'm not sure if all of you are familiar with them, but they touch on a number of things. Tell us who you are. We have humbling experience, coping with failure, critical thinking. Also, there's, added new this year, we added, and we also have advocacy, because you're always going to need to stand up for people who don't have a voice. And I think this is part of what you need to understand, that as a physician, you're going to be a leader within your community or within your university. And there's always going to be people who you're going to need to stand up for and make a difference for them, because that's your role. Two other things we added this year were, COVID implications, because we needed to understand how COVID had affected your ability to function as a student or, as a family member, because, back in March when we saw what was going to potentially happen, we made, a significant number of changes in order to address things with the anticipation that we were going to be shut down for a long time. So, and then touching on, what Charlene also talked about here, we've been very, open and receptive and adaptable to, a lot of the challenges that all of you have been facing, with trying to get experiences. Your research got shut down, your Fulbright got interrupted, or, things like that, or you had to go back home to help with, finances or all those things. And in the past, we had not accepted pass-fail for anything, and we had not accepted online labs. And now we're being very flexible, because we know that it's tough out there, and you don't have the opportunities that you ordinarily would have in a regular cycle. And we probably haven't seen too much right now, but again, it's probably going to be happening with the freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. So we're going to see this. It's going to be a ripple effect that's going to exist probably for maybe at least one generation of undergraduates, and hopefully it stops at that. Okay, I think, was that all you needed on that?
I think you mentioned how many applications, how many secondaries, maybe the process of interview selection.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So once you've once you finish your secondaries, there are a number of people who are going to read your applications, at least 3 or 4, and then we're going to look at your essays. We don't really pay all that much attention to your grades, and your MCATs are not our highest priority. Our highest priority is what you write in those essays and the experiences that you have. And from that, we invited last year 674 people. I think this year we're probably going to do 725 plus minus. And then of that, and so then we do the multiple mini interview, which is a little bit different than most places, I think. I think we're one of the first places in the United States to switch over. But part of that was driven by a couple of things. One, when we just had the traditional binary interview, there was some bias potentially introduced into that. Like, for instance, if, something simple as like, maybe your interview's from Duke and you're from Carolina and they don't like Carolina people. And so they may say, I think that's equivalent of the, Southern Cal, UCLA sort of issue that, they may not like you just because of where you went to school. But another thing was that sometimes we would be trying to retrieve the interview report from like a couple months later. And sometimes the interviewer would not remember who they interviewed. And so there's that, wasn't fair to the applicant, and it delayed the process of moving the application forward. But since we switched and then we switched our curriculum to a team-based learning format. So we needed to be able to assess a person's ability to work in a team. So that's what drove us to switch to the multiple mini interview. And then for us, the multiple mini interview now consists of 5 scenario type stations in which you're given a question and you need to provide an answer. We have 2 traditional interview stations because we felt with the purest form of the MMI that we could not get all the information that we wanted, because in the purest sense of the MMI, you don't know who the applicant is and the applicant does not know who's interviewing them. And so there are a lot of things that we still had questions about in the application that we needed to retrieve. So that's why we added 2 traditional interviews to the MMI process. And then we have a team station in which involves 2 rotations, one in which you're giving instructions to a person and one in which you're receiving instructions. And you have to, when we did it in person, you had to build stuff with Lego or Connects. When we're doing it virtually, you're actually drawing or solving a code or something like that. And then we also added a video station as well, in which we have a scenario in which you observe 2 medical students interacting with each other, and then you have to tell us what's going on and assess the situation and offer some sort of solutions. And so that's how the multiple mini interviews worked. And it's graded on, you get a score for each station, and we have a Z-score that standardizes everything for that day. And then you're both given a Z-score as well as a raw score for that. And I guess contrary to belief, we do not throw out any of the scores. All the scores are added in. So, I mean, even if you tank one station, you still have a chance at doing, well within the whole process. Okay, and then from the multiple meetings, so after you finish the interview process, then you go to exec committee, in which they present your entire application. The committee will vote on that. And then, then if you're offered acceptance, we'll contact you. I don't want to think I've used up too much time, right?
Great, thank you. Linda?
Hi, at the Drexel College of Medicine, we're one of the schools, I think, that is usually in the top 3 of application submissions. We normally get anywhere from 12,000 to 13,000. This year we got almost 17,000 people that applied. Yeah, it's a lot. We send a secondary to everyone. We normally get somewhere between 80 to 85% of the applicants complete their application. This year, that number is, over 13,000. So you can tell, and if you watch any or read any of the stuff online, people will say, geez, it takes a really long time to hear from Drexel. That's because we read every single one of those completed applications. And so that does take us a bit of time. We do a really holistic review. So there is a series of reviews that happen in screening. And then out of the screening committee, we probably invite somewhere between 12 to 1,500 people for an interview for a class of 300. Our cycle lasts pretty long. It starts in the beginning of September and it runs through the middle of April. That's just because we know that it takes a while for students to get through our system. We calibrate our offers of admission. So we send offers a batch once a month. This allows students who interview in February and March and even April to still be interviewing for a place in the class. We recognize that it may not have anything to do with when you submitted your application. It's more us getting through the process. We do a one-on-one traditional interview with a faculty member that's an open file. So they have an opportunity to ask you about anything in your application. The only thing they don't see are your letters of recommendation, but they see all the other things that you've submitted into AMCAS and your academic information. And our secondary essays that we ask of you. We also have a group student interview because we have a flipped classroom model where our courses are team-based learning and case-based learning. So you'll have an interview with a medical student who doesn't have any of your information, just your name. And they do it in a 2 to 3 group with one medical student because we want to see how you interact with others and how you might perform in a group. Our screening process is really holistic. We have ranges of students and I would encourage you to use MSAR if you haven't done that already. That is, I think, the best resource that students can use because it shows you the range of information, the range of scores. I think it can be a bit deceiving when people, especially with a class like ours that's large, when you look at the mean. We have students all the time who say, well, I have the mean MCAT and GPA, and how come I didn't get in? Well, you should look at the range because we really do a holistic review and we take a broad group of students, not only academically, but in all from like 29 different states, from 172 different universities, from 19 years old to well within their 30s, just a range of experiences. Our students we usually have about a quarter of our class who we consider to be Non-traditional, that means that they have been out of school for at least around 26 years old. And we have about 30%, anywhere from 25 to 30% of our class have graduate degrees. So we have a big range because we think that that really is helpful to us and to our students in case-based learning. Manisha, is there?
You got everything.
All right.
And then Agisha.
Okay, so just hearing from everyone else, our process probably will sound a little similar to Duke, but I'll just explain it briefly. So this year, we actually received a little over 11,000 applications. That was probably about a 4% jump from our applications of last year or the year before, our first inaugural year. And we do not have a minimum GPA or a minimum MCAT score looking for. We do review all of our applications holistically. Not to say that we're not looking at your MCAT or your GPA. I would definitely say check MSAR, check in with AAMC and start, looking at the benchmarks. Me personally, I know some people are really like, well, just give me something. I'm usually pretty much saying, if you're above a 500 and you are above a 0.0, in your sciences and your overall GPA, then you're competitive for us. So you want to kind of keep to that. But of course, I'm not saying just stay with that. Definitely strive to go a little bit higher than that as well. As far as our secondaries, we have all of our applicants application as long as you complete your admission file. For us, completion meaning you submitted your primary application and also an MCAT score. I know we've been hearing, due to the pandemic, will we be flexible with that? And we are willing to be flexible with that if that means that, there's no way for someone to take the MCAT. So it really is kind of a case-based situation. But for the most part, I would say about 97% of our students that did apply had an MCAT score. So we were able to review in that way. Again, we're always looking to see what is happening with the pandemic and if the pandemic can affect that process. And I think that's across the board for any medical school. As far as what is in that secondary application once you receive it, we have about 4 questions. Actually, it was 3 questions. We added a 4th due to the pandemic, and that 4th one is optional, but I think for the most part, mostly everybody used it, and it was tell us, how has coronavirus affected you? And this is really what we want you to tell us, as Dr. Yee was mentioning, maybe your research has stopped, maybe you are not able to volunteer anymore, or so on. So we want to hear that. That's what the file reviewers will be looking for. That's what your interviewers are going to be looking for in your admission files. So that's where you have the chance to tell us about that. Once you go through and submit your secondary application, we start the review process. We actually started the review process in July. And we started our interview process in August. We are actually still reviewing files and still interviewing, and we will continue that until about mid-March. So we are still doing that. I know a lot of people always email and say, am I still being considered? Yes, you are, because we're still not done reviewing files. That's a lot of files to go through. So actually, that is something I'll be doing later on today. I'll be reviewing files. So that's part of my job. So don't worry. For the most part, some of us are probably still reviewing. Don't ever lose hope and say that, I haven't heard anything in a couple of weeks or even a month. If you applied back as early as July, we are still reviewing. So, it's okay. From there, our secondaries, we do select our students from secondaries, our interviewees from secondary applications. I would say 750 to 1,000 as far as interviews that we're giving. It really does depend on how much time we have, but looks like we are trying to close everything out by the end of March as far as interviews go. So about it's competitive, just like everyone else said, it is competitive, but that doesn't mean that should stop you. You want to stand out, and I'll give some advice a little bit later. We have a hybrid approach to our interviews. That would be MMI, the multiple mini interviews, and also a traditional interview as well. Our MMIs are about 7 minutes. I know it's really short, but you get 7 minutes with a faculty member, and that is a blind interview. They don't know anything about you. And I think that's an advantage. That's basically your first impressions. You can make that first impression. Traditional interview, that interviewer has had your file for about a week. So they will be definitely asking you questions from your file. Let's see, am I missing anything? I think that's pretty much all I want to hit on there. But, from there, that is where we basically will have our students, where we are selecting anywhere from 48 to 50 students. We are also looking for at least 1 to 3 MD, PhD students as well. That's included in our cohort. And just going along with metrics, if you are looking at our metrics, don't let it deter you. That is just the mean. We are, like I said, we do the holistic approach. So we have students that have, been admitted with the 509 or 507. And, it just depends on that student. If that student was amazing, then, metrics is one part of your application. And that's what I really want people to know.
Thank you. I just want to reinforce a couple of points that you all made, because it's something that comes up very frequently. So the admissions process is long, okay? It's very long. It could be January, and just because you haven't heard anything does not mean the school is done with you, right? So no news is good news, but when you're hearing schools having to go through 9,000, 10,000 applications, it has nothing to do with your application. It's just they're pounding through one at a time, just to make sure they're giving you the holistic review. So keep that in mind when you go through this process. I'll have students ask me in November, should I be thinking reapplication? Like, absolutely not. The cycle is a baby right now. We've got time. Secondly, you all talked about a holistic review and that there's a range you're looking for. So I really appreciated that. And then thirdly, thank you for addressing the COVID situation, because I know that's changed a little bit of what applications look like, but it's also increased your process, right? So when you are an applicant, remember that it's not just your end of it. Medical schools are adapting themselves to the ever-changing system. Some are having to create platforms as to how they're conducting interviews or change platforms. So no news is good news. COVID has had an impact on how medical schools are reviewing applications. And a holistic review, numbers are good, but I think each one of these individuals has said they're looking for something more. So your numbers got you noticed, but we heard it could be 500 and a 3.0. It's what's the story narrative that supported that. So I just wanted to reinforce these few things because I heard it from all of you. I know in the interest of time, I do want to touch upon one question and then have you kind of add little bits, but you all touched upon it in your comments, but what does your school look for in an applicant? I heard distance traveled a few times. I heard the impact that COVID has had on you or your family. But what are those attributes? What are there must-have experiences? And then if you could also add a little bit to, what if something happened in my academic career, maybe, whether I had a huge dip, I had an impact, maybe I had a, administrative, judicial affairs impact. How does your school look at that? So any oopsies I might have had along the way. So from what are you looking for to how might an oopsie impact me? So Charlene, can I have you start again, please?
Sure. Well, first I want to acknowledge it's really hard to go first because when my colleagues are talking, I'm like, why didn't I say that? Why didn't I say that? So apologies if I'm leaving stuff out. So for the first thing, addressing like, what are we looking for? And I'll put this out there and say, maybe this is more broadly applicable to many medical schools, but specifically to UC Davis School of Medicine. I'll rephrase the question because people ask me, what should I put in my application as far as experience and activities and what should I include in my personal statement? You should include what is unique to your story and your journey and what makes you you. I think we're looking for those unique, authentic stories that, a lot of times we're always telling applicants, don't just check box. Don't just say, okay, I have a little research, I have a little community service, I have some clinical stuff. How does your story tie together and help the admissions committee understand why medicine? if you're a career changer, or you always wanted to do medicine since you were 4, whatever the situation is, you want to make sure your whole application flows from your activities to your personal statement, the things that you're doing. You want to make sure you pull those things out and think about the attributes that make a good physician. Like, what would you want to see in a physician? So if you are a college athlete, think about what you bring to the table. Discipline, ability to work on a team, blah, blah, blah. If you're a classic pianist, think about the things that brings to the table that would be unique to the first year class, that would be unique to the field of medicine, the things that make you you, and how you're going to connect that to your passion for medicine. So the why medicine question needs to really be answered, and your application needs to have some flow to it, some connectivity. So one great piece of advice that I give is make sure you have people who read applications a lot, read your application to make sure that that is coming across and it's super clear and there aren't questions about why are you pursuing medicine to begin with. So that's number one. I think the second piece of it, addressing kind of oopsies. So number one, that was kind of in my red flag section, things that you should address. So number one, institutional actions, from probation to, you were drinking in a dorm room or something like that. I've seen the same exact situation go really great for an applicant and go really bad for another applicant. So my number one advice is take accountability. You need to talk about this happened, I'm fully responsible, as briefly as possible, right? Because you don't want to waste a lot of space. Take accountability, talk about what you learned and what you're doing going forward and moving on. And I would even take it to the next level and mention something in there about ethics and like why you understand that ethics is a really important part, because that's one of the top attributes of a physician. We're looking for ethics, right? Because you're really admissions committee is trying to think about how that situation translates into how you will care for patients. And ethics is a huge part of that. And then if you have metric or academic, setbacks, don't leave that up to the imagination of the admissions committee to figure out what was going on with you. You need to actually address it and say, whatever was happening, I was working, or, it was my first time, coming from whatever town size you're from, going to a big institution. I didn't know how to access my resources, or maybe you were a transfer student and it was a difficult transition for you. So you need to address whatever the issue was. You were taking care of a sick parent, or you had to work 20 hours to contribute to your immediate family household. Whatever the situation is, you need to actually address it. Again, take accountability for it, and then talk about how you fix the problem. Like, I learned how to access my resources, and I connected with the pre-med group. And then how are you going to apply that moving forward? So I'll let the other panel members chime in, but those are my initial ideas on those two issues.
Thank you, Charlene. And yes, I understand I'm picking on you first each time, but you're doing great. You're doing wonderful. Dr. Yee?
Right. So I think, a lot of what you're going to have is you have to show that grit, resilience, because ability to tolerate ambiguity, because that's what you're going to be facing constantly in medicine. I mean, every day is going to be a challenge for you. And, every test you take is going to change. It's not going to be A, B, C, or D. It's going to be, well, my best guess is this is what you have, until you actually, get the specimen or do the operation, or, I mean, even sometimes with the imaging, it's not conclusive. So you've got to be able to, tolerate ambiguity, because medicine is not an exact science. It's sometimes it's a guessing game, and you're offering, the person that you have your best guess. Grit and resilience, your patients are going through some tough times, and you better, if you're going to walk the walk and talk the talk, you better have done that before as well. And so that's why, we look for, how you've been challenged, as an undergrad or even after an undergrad, because you're going to need to use those experiences to lead your patients along in this journey. And the more experience that you had like that, the better. I mean, because if you haven't done any of that, I mean, how are you going to, convince someone, hey, you need to really do all these things because that's the way it is. It's you have to have, gone through it in order to be able to lead better. And other things, we look at, I think, Charlene touched on this, integrity is a key element in terms of, what you're doing, because you need to have that in place in order be successful as a physician. Medicine's all about selfless service. Medicine is patient-centered. I mean, that's the core of your universe right there. That's the sun. The patient is the sun. So that's the center of your universe. So everything revolves around that, and everything you do has to relate to that. Other things, teamwork is critical. And I think, Charlene, you went first. So I'm embellishing what you said, but teamwork is a critical thing because it's not the ward person, it's the ward team. And you can think about all the challenges that you have in trying to figure something out. The more brains you have, the better. It just, again, it goes back to improving patient outcomes and improving, medical practice. You need the experiences of your colleagues to help figure out what's going on. And even like in a resuscitation situation as well, you don't want to be the one doing all the procedures. You don't want to be the one, putting in the central line, intubating, putting in the chest tube, because that takes time. If you have a team of people, while you're intubating, you've done that, then you immediately have the chest tubes going in. You've already got the lines in because you've got other people. That cuts down on the minutes that are absolutely critical in some of these situations. And it, again, improves patient outcomes. So that's why teamwork is critical. And that, touches onto, I think sometimes people accuse me of bias because we tend to get a lot of musicians here at Duke. And, that was one of my former, things that I did, but musicians add value, and as do athletes, as Charlene mentioned as well, because you understand the concept of teamwork and also, grit and resilience, because you have to go through all these things on a daily basis in terms of just practicing and grinding it out. Other things, emotional intelligence is also very critical. What is that? You need to understand how you think about things and use this awareness to manage your behavior as well as the relationships you have with you. And that's a critical part of teamwork as well. Can you understand what your team members are doing and how you can help them along in whatever journey? And then as a med student, you're going to need to do that as well for your classmates. If one of your classmates is struggling or you're going to need to help pick them up. I mean, that's part about being a team member and a good colleague. Are things that I miss, Anisha?
I think you did great. Thank you.
Okay.
Linda, and then if I could also have you touch upon, I had Charlene talk about the academic boo-boos. So Linda, if you can just add, where should these academic boo-boos be addressed? Because sometimes students will say, well, I need to put it in my personal statement. And I'm like, I don't know about that. So where should these be addressed after you talk about what your school's looking for?
So first, let me say, if I can give just one piece of advice, and if you don't remember anything I said today, I hope you remember this: apply with your best application. It's so important. I'm going to say it a second time. Apply with your best application. So what does that mean? That means if you're going through the process and you say, geez, all of these really great things that I hope to do, I didn't do them yet. And well, my MCAT, I'm not that happy with it. Then that probably is not your best application. Why do I say this? Because the process is expensive. It's financially expensive. It's emotionally expensive. And it's a long process. And you really want to apply and you want to get in this game when you're in the best place possible. And so sometimes I work with a lot of our post-bac students and they'll say, yeah, but my parents are really pushing me. Blame it on me. Tell them you went to this presentation and this dean of admission at Drexel told you not to, and I'll shoulder the burden for you. But apply with your best application and use your resources. So when we talk about what we're looking for, is we're really looking for something that we call word and deed. So we want the information that you write about when you do those experiences, and when you put in your personal statement, you say, this is what I believe in, this is what's important to me. That's the word, and we want to see it in action, in deed. So what are the kinds of things that you have done that let us know that it's just not a really good personal statement, that's really what you believe in? And those are the things that are important to you. So your personal statement and your experience section should be congruent in that way, right? We should see that these things that you say are important activities are reflected somehow in that personal statement. My colleagues talked about, hiccups and things that challenges that you might have had. And I just want to, from our perspective, we want explanations, not excuses. So those are two different things, right? I had terrible grades because my faculty wouldn't help me. Excuse. I struggled because I did not reach out to the resources or avail myself to the resources that are available. An explanation. So when you're talking about those things, the things that may have happened, be clear that these are explanations and not excuses, because we just talked about how many people that are applying to medical school, and we really understand that I certainly don't want to be judged by my 18 or 19 or 20-year-old self. We've all changed and hopefully grown along the way. So that's fine if you had a challenge, but we need to understand what happened and what's different. So where do you put it? Well, that's a tough one. So remember, your personal statement is really your brand, right? It's your elevator speech. It's that 2-3 minutes that, and on a school like ours, where we're reading 13,000 applications, we're going to get just that short window into who you are. So my suggestion to students is not to spend a lot of time in that statement calling attention to or spending a lot of time with negative things, right? Because I'm going to get a gestalt of you at the end of reading it. Not to ignore it, right? It can be 1-2 lines, had some challenges, use the resources, 2 lines, short thing. But then in the secondary applications to schools, and I know we and many of my colleagues do, we give you an opportunity to talk about something that you might not have had the opportunity to talk about in your AMCAS application, or you might not have the opportunity to talk about in greater detail. That's where you can talk about it. That's where you can tailor that to the school you're looking at. You have a little bit more time. Your personal statement goes to everybody, right? Every school that you apply to, but the secondary goes just to that school. So for example, if you're applying to Drexel and you had a lot of family obligations, for example, and that made it difficult for you to engage in some of the activities, or you had responsibilities, and that personal statement and that secondary, you can talk about that. We're looking for people who were committed to their community, and you can talk about what happened and then what is different. The what is different, when I think Charlene mentioned the folks who have institutional actions happens all the time. It's unfortunate when people have multiple institutional actions. It's hard to say you learn from something if it's happened multiple times. Sometimes there's space, right? 5, 6, 7 years ago, you can say that you've definitely grown from that. But when you're responding to that institutional action, think about what is it that we're trying to understand, right? Had an issue, is it resolved, and what happened? And of course, accountability is one of those things. I think someone mentioned in the chat about academic integrity. That's a tough one. That's a tough one for our committee. The plagiarism thing, sometimes I've seen students, they plagiarize their own work on an outline. I mean, forgot a quotation mark. I mean, that's a continuum, but real academic integrity, I think is tough, at least at our school, to overcome.
Thank you very much, Linda. And Nagesha?
I'm looking at the time, so I'll keep it short and sweet. Basically, we'll echo pretty much everything my colleagues on this panel has said. So I'll just touch on, I had a long list of attributes and things, but I have a few things I'll just really point out for our school. We are looking for critical thinkers, just like everybody else. Mature and adaptable is what we're looking for. For us specifically, we're looking for someone to demonstrate the desire to thrive in a diverse and inclusive environment, because that's our world, that's what we function in. And because we're a new school, you have to have an appreciation for an experiential curriculum. I mean, we are different, and we're not saying we're not different. So you have to show that appreciation there too. And that's just some attributes. Other attributes are pretty similar to other schools and what my colleagues have mentioned, but getting into some things that advice-wise, or what I would give. And literally, I just had a meeting with some of our file reviewers last night, and actually asked them, hey, I have a panel tomorrow. What would you say to students that are applying? So I got a lot of responses. So hopefully you can take some of these to heart, and I'll end with my favorite that I heard from one of our faculty members. touching on things that have happened in the past. One faculty member said you can't change what's already happened. So take responsibility and focus on reflection. And what did you learn from that? So they want to see that in your secondaries, or when you're going to address that. Avoid making excuses. Another faculty member mentioned that. Have you seen, they want to, if you've been shadowing other doctors, they want to know, like, have you seen any attributes in the particular doctors that you were shadowing and yourself? And what did you like about that? They want to see that come out. Clarity and clarify and articulate why you want to be a doctor. Like, that's big. That should be in your personal statement. And one thing that really just touched me, and I wanted to end on this. One faculty member mentioned demonstrate passion, not just ambition. It's big. Like, when they said that, I was like, whoa. Demonstrate passion, not just ambition. If you can do that, you won't hear just from one medical school. You may hear from a couple medical schools. That's what we are looking for. And I'll end on that.
Thank you. I wish we could keep this panel going for another hour because you all are so amazing. And I think the information, the feedback, the advice that you've been giving. I know I was supposed to end this at noon. So I just want to say thank you again for being here and taking time out of your Saturday morning for some, afternoon for some. But I really appreciate you touching some of these harder topics that are tough to, for future applicants to think about, like, am I still good enough? Or, or especially maybe they won't see it. Charlene, I'm glad you mentioned it, that they get to create the narrative. Don't, all of you, don't leave the interpretation to somebody else. You interpret the message. Don't blame. I think that's really key. And if I'm going to add one thing to that, if you can agree, don't compare. Your story is yours. I think when I read, unlike other applicants, I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. You don't know the 50,000 people that are applying. You know your story, right? So you create that narrative and present the soul you want to present on your application. Am I good with this for all of you? Okay. Thank you. So I hope to see you all again. We have one last session, and thank you for the panelists for adding some comments throughout the chat here and there for some of the questions that I've just were unable to get to. So thank you for adding those pieces and any contact information you were comfortable giving for questions. I don't envy you the rest of this process. You've got months to go, and another round of, sounds like a COVID application cycle. So thank you again. I appreciate you all. And for the students who are with us, we have one final session. So yes, if you wanted to post anything real quick in the chat of upcoming open houses, any last blurbs, this is the time. And then there's one last session for you all. But yes, I can't say thank you enough. This has been, I just love hearing from all of you because it excites me to get the next pool of applicants your way. So thank you again, and I will see you all very, very soon.
Take care, everyone. Be safe.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for the invite. Appreciate it. And
Thank
hopefully
you,
we'll talk to
everyone.
you in the future.
Be safe.
Thank you, Dr. Yee. Always a pleasure to have you.
Oh, yeah. Appreciate the invite, as always.